Hello, I'm going to be demonstrating the RAP4 468 dampener, and basically how it functions and the different variations of it, and how it's important, I suppose. So here it is. This is the lower receiver, fully assembled. I got the spring and the dampener and everything in there. So first things first, make sure safety is off. You're going to want to relieve the spring pressure before you do anything else. So you hold this back, pull the trigger, and slowly let it go forward. Okay. Now you can remove this, because there's going to be a lot less spring pressure against it. So you push in, turn, pull it out, and there we go. So here's my velocity adjuster, the spring, and a dampener that I made. You can tell because they're blue. So now to show what the dampener itself actually does, I'll first demonstrate without any dampener at all. So this is what it would be like if you don't have a dampener. So this is locked in. The spring would normally push that back, so I'll just pull it back. And yeah, the pin can hit the metal of the receiver. It may not, depending on your velocity settings, your spring tension, whatever. So this is something that just could happen. It won't necessarily happen, but having spent as much money as I have on this marker, I'd rather it can't happen. So that's the idea of the dampener. So now I will insert the original one that came with my marker. It's a thin dampener. So there's two different thicknesses that RAP4 has made, a thin and a thick. The thick is twice as long. So the one I made should be roughly the same dimensions as the thick one that RAP4 sells. As you can see, mine that I made is basically twice as thick, or long, I suppose you could say. Anyways, here's what a thin one does. Put that in there, and this. And having no spring makes it much easier to demonstrate this. So if you want to test this yourself, that's the way I recommend it. Unfortunately, even with a thin dampener, it can still hit. So thin dampener or no dampener, there isn't really going to be much difference. The pin will still have the potential of getting bent. As I said, it may not happen, but it could. The only thing I can think of that a thin dampener would do, I'm going to have to get it out of there. The thin one doesn't like to come out, by the way. My thick one doesn't have that issue, but the thin one, I really have to fight with it to get it out. Helps when there's a spring for it to come out on, but yeah. Anyways, so all I can think of that the thin one would do is when it's on the spring and it's outside the marker, it would prevent the spring from going up or down or left or right. It'll keep the spring centered. That's all it does, as far as I can tell. Whereas this thick one that I made, I'll demonstrate what it does. Okay, here we go. The pin, it can no longer go all the way back. It's about a millimeter from, and I can't put enough pressure to get it to touch. Like this is a fairly strong material. It's silicone rubber, and it's blue. That's about all I know about it. But it was the right dimensions, so I made a dampener. And this one, not only will it prevent the spring from being able to move inside of the marker, it also prevents the pin from contacting the metal. I still have to put some rounds through my marker to make sure that it doesn't, but at any rate, I feel much safer having that versus none, or even the thin one. Even I prefer the one I made just for the sake of feeling like I can rely on it more. So even if having no dampener, my marker would never get damaged, I prefer the idea that it can't happen, right? So there's a good amount of money in some of these markers. I mean, you could spend $3,000 if you went all tricked out. So, so I'm going to be charging very little for these dampeners if I sell them. So, I think it's worth the investment. And if RAP4 they start selling theirs, there you go. It should be roughly the same, I would think. But they're not selling them yet, so this will, I guess, help people out hopefully in the meantime. So there you go.